Dames en heren, goedemiddag.
Hoi hoi, hello and welcome to the Meet Maastricht podcast. I'm Katrina and together with our resident local Lucy, we will be exploring some of the amazing stories that make Maastricht so special. So sit back, relax and join us as we learn about our favourite Dutch city. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 28 of the Meet Maastricht podcast. This week we have another very special episode for you with a guest that you might recognise from previous episodes, Jus Minnes, with a special appearance from his girlfriend Nina. This episode we are all discussing borders and belonging. So borders in the Netherlands and in Maastricht in particular, and the cultural identity that comes along with that. So we hope you enjoy this special episode. This will be part 1. Part 2 will be coming out next week, so make sure to keep an ear out for that one too. What are we talking about today? Either one of you.
We're going to talk about borders.
Borders.
I think.
Yes.
Yes, not people who come to live in your house.
Borders.
But
more like borders, like border collies.
So borders in relation to Limburg and the Netherlands, I'm guessing?
And countries in general.
And just countries in general. Yeah. Well, I mean, where did you want to start? It's a broad theme.
It is. Lucy came to me and explained that many of your listeners are from countries where borders were drawn out on a map with a ruler and a pencil. And that for those people, it's very strange to see borders as fluent as they are in Europe.
Or for people like me, whose borders are drawn by an island. Obviously we have our actual borders are in the ocean, but it's quite obvious when you don't think too hard about it that it is the shape of Australia is our border. But so it is weird for me, even just the straight line borders are interesting for sort of where does one country stop and where does one country start and who decides that and how come I can just walk into Belgium and there's no one stopping me from my house.
Yeah, that takes.
Right now there is, of course.
Yeah,
that's not true now. They practically have armed guards on the border again.
But for our listeners in the future, this has been recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes,
and all the panic surrounding that. So yeah, we get into some weird situations here. But I find that quite a few people who come from countries which have been colonized basically by the Western powers in the 19th century, could look at the map of Europe and wonder why the lines are where they are.
Yeah.
And of course, this is very applicable when it comes to the shape of the Netherlands. Mm. Why is there this funny worm thing in the south? You know, how come that belongs to the Netherlands?
Yeah.
Why is it shaped that way? That is very often the starting point of discussions about borders. And my go-to definition, not definition, but the briefest condensing of the topic of today would be borders are lines on a map. Mm. And that is determined by war and diplomacy. But differences between people or commonalities between people don't adhere to these lines. Mm. So identities, constructed or not, and it turns out they are usually basically constructed. But what people identify with does not necessarily coincide with these lines on the map. So these borders are an outcome of war and diplomacy, as I said, but identities are...
Yeah, it's a war and diplomacy, but it's also agreement between people. Because people have to agree with these borders, because if people do not agree with borders, then the borders stop existing.
Yeah, but that then leads to revolutions or wars, or which then have to be concluded in diplomatic exchanges and everything. So it seems you are watching a process here of the lines coming from above and the identification coming from below. But that is a drastic oversimplification.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're gonna talk about. But only Joos and I agreed beforehand of the yes.
From 1795 onward.
Yes.
Because before 1795, it's a very, very, very chaotic situation here, and in many parts of Europe, for that matter.
Yeah.
So we are really going to talk about 19th century Europe, because things that happened in the 19th century are the things that we still have to deal with today. And everything that happened, well, most of the things that happened before that are less relevant now. Can I oversimplify it like that, Lucy?
Yes, I'm sort of nodding in agreement here. Yeah. What I was thinking about in the meantime is that maybe we should say 2 sentences about why we use 1795 as the breaking point, because of course to non-European studies not an obvious thing. Why is that?
That was
why
my question.
Yes, Katrina, why is that?
Why 1795? Tell me.
Well, in 1795, well, it's a matter for Maastricht, of course. Maastricht was made capital of a French department, because in 1789 the French Revolution broke out. It's a very chaotic period of time for like 5 years, which I will not go into detail right now. But long story short, the French conquered Maastricht and made Maastricht a province, a département of the French Republic.
Okay.
And they made away with all the old borders and just installed a whole new government here.
Okay. And
my girlfriend is coming in. Hi, Nina.
And what about the countries just around the Netherlands? So Belgium.
They were all conquered by France.
Yeah.
Belgium did not exist, of course.
Okay.
So that's why we wanted to start in 1795, because otherwise we have to go into the federation of the Habsburg monarchy and Liège and the Reichsstadt Aachen, and then of course Jülich and how all these, and of course the Freiherrschaft Gronsveld and the Freiherrschaft Dahlem, and how the Freiherrschaft Dahlem was partially Dutch and partially Austrian. So we're going to skip all that, and we're going to start with the French conquering everything.
Okay. Yeah. But in saying that, so a slice of life, if we're talking about identity and constructing identity, what would a Limburgian, I'm sure, I don't know what they would be called at that particular time.
A Limburgian by then was somebody from the Duchy of Limburg, which is now in the province of Liège, it's a small town, 6,000. So 6,000 people living in Limburg. That's the actual Limburg.
Yeah.
So those were the Limburgish people.
Yeah. Okay.
Those were the ones with the Limburgish identity, and they had a cheese, a very, very nice cheese.
Very nice cheese.
Yeah. So in America, they call a smelly cheese in America is called Limburger, after the cheese that is from this city, Limburg.
Okay.
And here we call it Hervense kies, so cheese from the county of Hervé, or Romedoux. So far for unnecessary knowledge.
No, well, if that's part of their identity, the cheese people.
I don't think that's part of their identity back then, because I think people back then did not have an identity from the place they were from. They identified themselves as Catholics. Okay.
And what language were they speaking then?
That's a very hard question. We call this language now Plat-Dietz. It's a Limburgish sounding dialect. But it's not clear how the language borders moved in the 18th century. Okay. So we don't know.
All right.
Of course, they wrote everything in French, but that's not their language.
No.
Because there's a discrepancy between the language you speak and the language you write in.
Yeah. Lucy, did you want to say something?
Maybe it helps to think of this region of the Meuse and the Rhine, not at their beginnings and also not at their estuaries in what is today Holland, but this middle segment of these two large European rivers they cross borderlands, so to speak, the Meuse-Rhine region, which probably only in the early Middle Ages had a significance beyond its own region, but that as a region stayed closely together in culture and language and traditions and faith for centuries on end. So if there was an identity, it might have been that, but not along all the criteria that you would now apply.
Yeah.
Also, that has been definitely broken apart by the nation building of the 19th century. Then the Rhineland became definitively, conclusively German. And the Maas country, then there was still this, both along the levels of state and language, there were still ruptures.
Yeah.
And you can still feel that today. Because 5 minutes south of Maastricht, people are francophone.
Yeah.
And we no longer are. But in the period where we are starting, right after the French Revolution, when these areas are governed by the French, of course, the language of the law, of the administration, of anything public is French.
Yeah.
Also, communities were a lot smaller back then.
Yeah.
So when you're with only 1,000 people in the city of Limburg, you do not identify as a Limburger, nor as of course as a Catholic, because you are Catholic, but you identify as a carpenter or as a farmer.
Yeah.
And you do the things a farmer does. The only reference material you have are from the same community.
Yeah.
And of course people move, but way less than now. And there's also way less people than now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and added to that is lack of the type of transportation that you have seen develop in the 19th century. With the
mass transportation.
Mass transportation. First, the building of the roads, which of course already started under Napoleon, but which was extended in the decades after that. Then the coming of the trains. Telling detail is that Maastricht had train connections to Aken and to Leuk before it had train connections. So Aken is the Germanic part of this borders region. Leuk is francophone. Aken is now in Germany. Leuk is today in Belgium.
Yeah.
And in the Walloon region, which is a French dialect. And the last connection that came to be by rail was to the north.
Yeah.
So, it is in things like that you can also see that the orientation of people, especially in the southern half of what is today the Dutch province of Limburg, was not to the north at all.
No.
But what helped, of course, was a sort of unification policy by the Dutch kings and educational policies. There was a heavy pressure from the central government in The Hague.
Yeah.
To have people be educated, but also for people to be taught the Dutch canon. This is the condensation of knowledge that we need you to know about yourselves.
Yeah.
Funny thing is that even in the most recent canon of the Netherlands, that was published only a year ago or so, there were still comments from southern scholars saying, "How did you manage to skip Sauvage?" For instance.
Yeah.
In the Dutch national canon, there will be attention paid to the missionaries who brought Christianity to the Low Countries, and they will start with Willibrord, who came from Great Britain. Sauvage was a missionary in the region around what is now Maastricht 200 years earlier. That is not in the national canon, and that's just one example of how people in this region can still feel they are not fully incorporated into the Kingdom of the Netherlands of today.
Yeah. Well, and you can see really that's where the constructed identities are very, very obvious. It wasn't, hidden or secret. They're very obviously, very clearly constructing a Dutch identity and serving it to you on a plate and saying, this is who you are. Which is, so you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that it may seem odd, of course, that people from the same language region are not from the same cultural region. But you have to take the geographic thingy. So there's sand grounds in between the Meuse Rhine and Holland, and there's not many people who live there. So there is no reason to go there from here.
Okay.
So the Kempen, Noord-Brabant, Gelderland, Utrecht. It's a long way from Maastricht to there, where Liège and Köln and Brussels is nearby.
Yeah.
So that's why from the ancienneté there is the culture of this region comes from places like Köln and Brussels, and not from Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I'm slightly afgeleid because my girlfriend is sitting next to me now. I asked Nina to sit here because Nina is half Bulgarian, half Dutch, and grew up in Germany.
Oh. Yes, that must make for some interesting experiences as well. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And maybe she can add some
Yeah, of course.
Bulgarian wit.
I hope so.
Yeah, because I think added to transportation and education, I think we also should keep in mind the factor of industrialization. So the Industrial Revolution in this area, and that is the Meuse Rhine region. So it stretches into Belgium, it stretches across Limburg into Germany. The contemporary national state is mining, the coal industry, the coal mines. They required more and more workers.
Yeah.
And they started getting their workers not just from Limburg, but from the rest of the surrounding countries as well. And as time went on, from further and further away. So, Nina, it would be interesting to know, did your Bulgarian family come here because of the mines? Was there any connection there? They didn't. Okay.
No.
And the last installment of this labor movement was the mines recruiting workers from places like Morocco.
Oh, wow.
So in a way, this region, the Meuse Rhine region, has remained a border region, and in the late 19th and early 20th century, even in a more reinforced fashion, with all these extra nationalities from ever further away coming into the region and settling here, and that made for some interesting conflicts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did the mining, was that a big proponent for the trains coming? Because I know that where I grew up, the reason we were so well connected with the coast, where I grew up in Australia, was because of the mines. Where I grew up was a mining town originally, so there was a really good train system. So was that one of the reasons the trains came?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. To the north, anyway. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, so 1795. What if we've just talked about sort of before the identity of Limburgians as they were and the Rhine-Meuse region, what happened after that date then?
So to identity, not that much after 1795. Well, let's take it 10 years at a time.
Okay.
In 1795, there's all of a sudden there's a French government here. There's a French province here, and it's more or less. Well, the French actually wanted to create a big province in the north of the country, with Liège as capital. So this should be the département Meuse Inférieure. But there was a politician and advocate from Maastricht, Charles Roemers, and he told the French, you cannot just put these people from the north along with the people from the south of this region you want to create. Because the people from the north, the southern region is more or less the province of Liège, and they were under the Prince Bishop of Liège. They had this sort of cultural identity in the sense of people knew how to get from one place to another, and there was some social mobility possible in all of the Prince Bishopric. But because of the truly chaotic nature, See why Nina is very handy? So because of the chaotic nature of this region, it was already very difficult to make it one province. So Charles Rumors said, make this chaotic region one province and then make Liège the other one. So the French listened to Charles Rumors and they made the département Ourthe, which was the old country of Liège, so the old Prince-Bishopric of Liège. And then above that, Département Meuse-Inférieure, so the department of the Lower Meuse, which consisted of modern-day Belgian and Dutch Limburg.
Okay.
Or as I like to call it, Western and Eastern Limburg.
Okay.
And those people spoke mostly Dutch. Well, those people wrote each other in Dutch, but also in French and also in German. It didn't really matter.
Okay.
This is definitely the first stage
Yeah.
of things after the French Revolution. Yes, and it's good to put a spotlight on Charles Rumors because he is basically unknown in Maastricht, which is weird, because he was important in this restructuring that Hughes is describing.
Well, of course, he has to compete with Napoleon, who was from the same time and who had lots and lots of propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read this weekend that he had so many paintings of himself in which he was idealized that his own generals did not recognize him.
I'll have to find a good. Hopefully, there's one good picture of Charles, and we'll put it in.
Oh, there would be.
There is.
Okay, next stage.
Yes. What happened next?
What happened then is that the Kingdom of the Netherlands was formed with their first king. Let's see if either Katrina or Nina know who the first king of the Netherlands was.
I feel like there's an orange.
That's cool.
So
No.
is it? He's not.
No, it's not an orange.
He is not an
He was
orange?
French.
He's not.
No, he was French. Oh, Lucy didn't know!
Yeah,
The
this is a
brother.
trick question. It went. I realized
Not a
now.
trick question.
Yes, it was not an orange.
It wasn't
No.
an. Oh, well, that's me gone. I'm out.
It was not an orange, it was a lemon.
Okay.
No, it was the brother of Napoleon Bonaparte,
Oh.
Louis Bonaparte, and he installed the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and he actually formed this kingdom. And beforehand there was a Republic of the Netherlands, which you cannot really compare to a country, because it was more like a federation, more like the United States of America, in which every state has its own law, and
Or a confederation.
or like Star Wars. Yes. You can compare the Dutch Republic to Star Wars.
Or Australia. You know,
Hoe dan?
we have the same. We have
Or
states.
Australia,
We
for
have
that matter,
states
yeah.
too.
Or India.
And so, where was the Kingdom of the Netherlands? I guess we're talking about borders. Where did that? Was that similar to what we have now? What we consider the Netherlands now?
Yeah, very similar with the exclusion of Limburg.
Oh, so it didn't have the little bulb down the bottom.
Nope,
Okay,
because that was French.
right. And so what happened then with the new king?
So the new king was not liked by the people, and the people more or less revolted against him. And then the French did not want any more revolts, and they just annexed the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Oh.
I believe 1807, but I don't know that. So that's when all of the Netherlands became French.
Okay.
And then in 1814, William of Orange, who was to be called William I, announced that he would create a new kingdom, the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, which would consist of modern-day Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg.
Okay.
And after Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, from the ABBA song, the Allied forces gave him this kingdom,
Okay.
which was meant as a buffer state against the French,
Yeah.
because they didn't think that this old, very chaotic system of duchies and counties and prince-bishoprics was able to stop the French, because they conquered them with such ease in the 1990s of the 18th century. I think we're going to lose a lot of listeners. Well, you are going to lose them.
That's all right.
Yeah. No,
That's okay.
I suppose it's good to alternate the map drawing from resulting from war and luck and diplomacy and all that with the more lively stuff. But it is necessary to realize that maps were drawn and redrawn and redrawn and redrawn at a pretty much frenetic pace. I mean, there have been decades at the very beginning of the 19th century where people in one lifetime, without moving house, could have had 4 different nationalities.
Yeah.
I mean, that happened.
Yeah.
That is how messy a period that has been. And of course, after Napoleon was defeated, the map of Europe had to be redrawn pretty much in its entirety. And here on this northwestern part of Europe, which needed to hem in France from the north, I think that took most of the 19th century to sort itself out. What would you take as the end point of that use of this sorting itself out?
The end point of sorting itself out. Sorting what out?
The nation, the map drawing to the north of France. I mean, when was that finally resolved?
I believe in Mouscron there have been some things in the 21st century.
Oh, okay.
So, but let's take it a little bigger than that. Yeah. So that would be 1871.
Okay.
With the German-French War and the Alsace becoming German, and then of course the First World War. But it's you can't really pin it down.
Yeah. Well, it has been for 75 years now. They have not been withdrawing maps. I mean, a few years ago there was a very peaceful, even slightly festive exchange of some Dutch territory for some Belgian territory, but that was on the seacoast, and I think it was all.
There was also some here. Because the river Meuse moved slightly to the left.
Yeah.
And there was a peninsula near IJsden, which could only be reached from the Dutch side of the Meuse, but was actually Belgian. So it was used as a place for people to meet each other to have sex. There was lots of disturbing of wildlife going on. I'm looking for euphemisms here.
Yes, obviously.
And if somebody saw it, then they had to call they called the Dutch police, but the Dutch police couldn't do anything, and they had to call the Belgian cops, and then they had to ask for permission to cross the River Meuse to do something about it on Dutch land, and then of course they just put the border back in the middle of the river.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, the first time this happened without a war.
Yes.
They didn't want to start a war.
This was also peaceful redrawing of the maps.
Yes.
Yeah. But of course, if we pick it up again at the beginning of the 19th century, the Conference of Vienna, where the European powers decided what Europe was going to look like after Napoleon was defeated, that envisaged this large, strong kingdom on the northern border of France, and that is today the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And seeing that is the fact, I mean, stuff must have happened between then and now. The pace of developments was still pretty high because it was already in 1815 that the southern part of the kingdom was saying they were not really satisfied with this king, and they rose up in revolt.
Right. So of course this whole region of Benelux, let's call it that, had never ever been one state. So it was very hard, not only for the people who lived there, but also for the politicians who governed it, to find some sort of midway to cooperate with each other. And of course there were Holland was rich, so the provinces of Holland, northern and South Holland. But the southern part of the kingdom was way richer with Liège and Brussels, and there was a discrepancy between those two. And there's also a major cultural difference because the north was Protestant and the south was Catholic.
Mm.
And the new king was Protestant as well. And in the north, the people liked the oranges. So not oranges.
The house.
Everybody likes oranges.
Now I'm intolerant. I can't have oranges. I'm allergic. So
Oh dear.
it's a fun fact.
It exists.
Let's not fall into a sidetrack.
No, but people liked the House of Orange.
Yeah, in the north and in the south, they didn't.
Right.
And William I wanted to connect the north and the south with a new canal, the Zuid-Willemsvaart, so the Southern Williams
Canal.
Canal.
Okay.
Canal.
Canal. Yeah.
Canal. Okay, so the canal, which was meant to connect the, and I never know if it is harbor or dock.
Just harbor.
So the Hollandish harbors with the industry of Liège, because Liège was the first first city on the European continent to be industrialized. And he wanted to connect them to connect his new kingdom, the southern part and the northern part. And you can see the Zuid-Willemsvaart because it ends in Maastricht. And it starts in Den Bosch.
You have to look really hard, but yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
always,
the bassin
Yeah.
yeah.
with the Sphinx and the
Lumière Cinema.
Yeah.
cinema. That's the end point of the Zuid-Willemsvaart.
Oh, okay.
So Maastricht played a pivotal role in connecting the north and the south.
But it didn't go any further.
No, because you have to manage to go further, and Maastricht always had this transportation hub function between Liège and Amsterdam.
Plus, a separate canal was built from Maastricht to Luik.
Yes, but that was built years later.
That was much later, yes, because then they took no regard whatsoever of the fortifications. You can see this very well in the scale model of 1867, and of course in what remains of the canal in the 3D reality. The Zuid-Willemsvaart was very, very carefully woven through the fortifications so as to not weaken them, or weaken them as little as possible. And the canal to Luik just rams straight through. Never mind.
There are still remnants of the canal to Luik. It's the pond before the Vive Cup.
Yeah.
So if you go to the city park, you have the wall that fell down. You know that one? Yeah. There's a pond in front of that, and that's the old canal. Yes, Maastricht. Yes.
Ah, interesting.
Dug out by women.
Oh.
It was dug out by women. I think that's also a cute part of the story. Yeah. Anyway,
But we can pick it up again at.
Yes, let's.
So the
1850.
bassin was constructed in 1824, and this meant that Maastricht became a transportation hub.
Yeah.
Really, when you have a transportation hub, then it also becomes attractive to start some industries.
Yeah.
In the vicinity of that hub, and that's what happened in Maastricht. So Regoe, whom you've talked about a lot in this podcast, started his factories in 1826.
Right.
So that's 2 years after it opened, and he made use of goods coming from Liège, turning them into something, and then transporting them to Amsterdam, where they could be traded further on.
Yeah. As well as goods coming and industry, did people come? Were there a lot of people who came to Maastricht or moved out of Maastricht?
It's a little too early for that, I think. 1826. There was always people coming to the city, but at the time Maastricht was not a very popular city to go to because of the fortifications that surrounded it.
Okay.
So it was always very dangerous to come to Maastricht, and you have to realize that the city only opened at 9 o'clock in the morning, then closed again at 12, opened again at 2, and closed again at 6. So it was not a nice city to live in at the time, which is also why the region around Maastricht industrialized, so what we now call the Heuvelland.
I think that in the period right after, when Maastricht was held for the king by General Dibbets, that there was an outflux of people. But this is the next installment of the story. But then there definitely were people fleeing the city.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for this episode. You know we love good chat. Make sure to tune in for part 2 next episode. And in the meantime, I hope you have a lovely week. Thank you so much for listening to the Meet Maastricht podcast. To keep up to date with all our content and events, make sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Meet Maastricht and on Facebook at Come Meet Maastricht. If you love our podcast and would like to see some amazing archival images as you listen, don't forget to subscribe to the Meet Maastricht YouTube channel. If you love what we do and would like to support the Meet Maastricht team, you can also donate through PayPal via our website meetmaastricht.eu. Meet Maastricht is definitely a labour of love, and all of the revenue we make through our tours and events currently goes towards administration costs. With your help, we would love to be able to give back a little something to the team so we can all keep bringing you our favourite stories and showing you our favourite places in Maastricht. Thanks again, and tune in next time to learn more about our beautiful city.
Tot ziens.